Okay, so let's get into DNS-PERSIST-01. And I want to start by being super clear. This thing is a genuinely great advancement. Seriously, it solves so much real-world operational friction for anyone who's ever tried to automate certificates. But, with any cool new tech that promises to make our lives easier, we kind of have to have that slightly uncomfortable conversation where we ask ourselves, all right, what's the catch? What are the new security assumptions we're making here? And man, the operational win is just, it smacks you in the face when you see it laid out like this. On the left, that's the old DNS-01 dance, right? The create a record, wait for propagation, validate, clean it up. And you do that for every single renewal. It's just constant noise. And on the right, you set one record, one time, and then renewals just happen, silently, magically. That's not just a nice to have, that's getting a huge chunk of your operational overhead back. I mean, think about all the pain points that constant churn caused. You had DNS API credentials sprinkled all over your infrastructure. Every renewal had to have minutes of propagation delay baked right into the process. And in any large organization, you know the absolute nightmare of trying to get a change ticket for something that happens every 60 days. Just making that noise go away is a massive, massive game changer. But here's the pivot. Here's the trade-off. All that operational friction, it goes away. But the risk doesn't just evaporate. It shifts. It moves to a new part of the system. And the single biggest shift is how we have to think about our ACME account key. It's not just a key anymore. It basically becomes a long-lived, super powerful authorization token. And this is the magic that makes it all possible. The underscore validation persist record. It's just a simple TXT record, but the really important bit is that account URI value. What that does is it explicitly ties the authorization to one specific ACME account. It's basically a public declaration saying, hey, the account at this URI, it has my permission to issue certificates for this domain whenever it wants, forever. It's not a temporary challenge, it's a standing order. And this is where the new blast radius becomes really clear. Before, with the old DNS-01, if someone stole your ACME key, it was bad, for sure. But they still had to go and create a DNS record, and you might notice. Their window of opportunity was small. Now, with DNS-PERSIST-01, that same compromised key lets them instantly and silently issue valid certs for every single domain that has one of these persistent records pointing to that account. The attack window isn't minutes, it's as long as that record exists. So this is the fundamental mental model shift. Our security focus has to move. It's not about protecting temporary DNS write access anymore. The ACME account private key is the crown jewel. It's the thing that matters, and we have to start treating it with the same level of security and paranoia as we treat our most sensitive private keys. And if we're being honest, most of us, we don't store those keys that carefully today. Now let's talk about a really subtle, kind of sneaky risk. When you add policy equals wildcard to that persistent record, you're not just authorizing star.example.com. You're actually authorizing issuance for any subdomain, including ones that don't even have a DNS record yet. So think about it. If an attacker can perform a subdomain takeover, maybe they find a dangling CNAME pointing to a service they can claim, your persistent authorization just handed them a valid trusted TLS certificate for it. That's a huge deal. And this brings us to the next challenge. The whole beauty of this thing is that it's set and forget. It's operationally fantastic, but that's also where the security blind spot comes in. Because when things get quiet, we just stop listening. So you really have to ask your team this question. Now that all that DNS churn is gone, who's actually watching? Who's listening for the things that shouldn't be there? The very silence we were aiming for creates a whole new kind of problem. You see, with the old DNS-01, all that activity was a signal. You had a baseline. An anomaly, something weird, was more likely to stick out. In this new, quiet world of DNS-PERSIST-01, you have to create your own signals. That means you have to start intentionally monitoring your DNS zones for any new or changed underscore validation persist records. And you absolutely have to be watching certificate transparency logs like a hawk for any certs issued for your domains that you didn't expect. Okay, let's say the worst happens. You find a rogue record, or you have a really bad feeling that an ACME key has been compromised. What's the plan? Well, your old incident response playbook is probably useless here. You need a new one. You basically have two big red buttons you can push now, and they have very different consequences and timelines. On one path, you just remove the TXT record from DNS. On the other path, you go nuclear and deactivate the entire ACME account. Let's dig into what that actually means. This part is so important to understand. Removing the TXT record is like using a scalpel. It stops any new validations from succeeding. But, and this is a huge but, the certificate authority is allowed to reuse a recent validation for up to 10 days. So it's not an instant kill switch. Now, deactivating the ACME account, that's the hammer. RFC 8555 is very clear on this. It kills all authorizations for that account, across all domains, instantly. But it is permanent. It is irrevocable. You can't undo it. That account is gone forever. Okay, so let's tie this all together. The point here isn't to scare you away from DNS-PERSIST-01. Not at all. It's about going into it with a clear head, knowing exactly what you're signing up for. And here's the thing about great automation. The smoother the happy path becomes, the more we depend on it. And the scarier it gets when things break. Because, well, the team loses the muscle memory of how to do things manually. We have to be prepared for the unhappy path, for when the magic stops working. So, what does adopting this thoughtfully actually look like? Well, it's a new to-do list. First, you have to update your threat model to treat that ACME account key as a primary asset. Go audit where those keys are stored and lock them down properly. Set up active monitoring for these validation persist records. And for the love of all that is holy, document your new incident response plan for both revocation paths before you ever need it. And just be really careful with policy equals wildcard. If there's one thing you walk away with from this, let it be this right here. You are not eliminating risk. You are trading it. You're swapping a frequent, annoying, but fairly low-impact operational risk for a much less frequent, but more persistent and potentially much higher impact security responsibility. Look, DNS-PERSIST-01 is absolutely the right way forward for the ecosystem. It's an incredible improvement. But as you embrace it, as your certificate automation gets quieter and more invisible, the question you have to ask yourself is my security monitoring loud enough to notice when something is wrong?